Well, good morning, everybody. This is Steve Rayburn here at US Duct, and I will be your, I guess, presenter here for our advanced webinar this month. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. And as most of you know by now, these webinars are our way of making sure that you guys stay abreast of all of the latest and greatest that we have to offer with DuckQuote, and that you're getting the most out of the tool. The tool does continue to evolve. We do continue to make small tweaks, changes, improvements, and we want to make sure you guys are getting the most out of those. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at a few common challenges that I hear and several of the other Duck guys here hear from you folks who are using DuckQuote. And one of these is an arch nemesis. We hear this and have heard this almost from the beginning, is that folks don't quite understand Y branches. And I'm talking about a pair of pants Y where you've got things leaving at equal angles. And we're also going to take a look at what happens when we are drawing a section or a line of duct and it seems to get pulled off by snap lines. So we're going to be talking about snap lines and how they work. And then we're going to take a look at something that, well, maybe most people aren't that familiar with, and that is the pros and the cons of using connections on pieces of equipment. So without further ado, we're going to do what I always do with the advanced class to make sure that you are getting the latest and greatest on DuckQuote, which is a web-based app. We need to make sure that we keep our cache cleared. So this particular browser I'm using is Chrome, and I will do this in Chrome, and I'll also come back and do it as well in Edge. Those are the two most common that we hear folks using. So up in the top right, you'll see three dots. These are vertical in Chrome. And if you click on that, you get a menu. And if we scroll down to more tools, we get a secondary menu. And what we want is to clear browsing data. Now, what data do we need to clear? The only thing that we need to clear as far as DuckQuote goes is we need to clear the cached images and files. What that does is it forces DuckQuote to reach back out, reestablish a connection with the latest version of what's on the site, and make sure that that's what you get loaded. So you can clear your cookies and your browsing history if you want, but the only one you need is cached images and files. Once that is checked, we click the clear data button, and the speed at which that works is directly proportional to how often or how long it's been since you cleared your cache. So with that said, we are going to now pull up. This is Edge, Microsoft Edge, and we will open that up. And again, up in the top left, there are three dots, but those dots are horizontal here on Edge. So if I click that, you can see that I get a menu just like before. And if we come down to history, click on that, you can see that we get the history menu, okay? Now, up here on top of the history menu, there are more options, another set of dots. We click on that and we get to our clear browsing data. And this works almost the same as before. The difference being is that Edge gives you more choices of things that you can clear. Again, the only thing you need to do for DuckQuote is to clear the cached images and files. So we'll go ahead and do that. And that is it. That's how we clear our cache. So we'll come back to Chrome. That's what I like to use. And I'm going to go ahead and log in. Now, as we start into this, one of the things that we need to kind of remember is that DuckQuote is basing all of the duct that it's creating for you on the center lines that you draw. Okay, so I'm going to hop into one of our training things here. And the first thing that we're going to cover is Y branches. So once again, I want you to think. DuckQuote is basing everything that it gives you on what you've built out in the design tab and the center lines that you create to tell it where the duct goes. All right. This is actually what makes DuckQuote so fast and easy, is that all you have to do is draw a line between one point and the next. So you draw the center line and DuckQuote is going to fill in the duct and or the fittings based on what you've got in the design tab and what you're doing. Okay. So here we had someone who was looking for a Y branch, a pair of pants Ys. So they drew out until they hit where they wanted to have the trunks that left and went out to the various machines. And then they drew straight from the end over. And then they called me up and said, there's a problem. It keeps giving me a double branch. Okay, now, so the first thing that you want to ask yourself is, okay, I'm not getting what I expect, so let's pretend that it's my fault. So what did I do wrong from the point of view of DuckQuote, right? So ask yourself, did you draw the center line of a Y branch, or did you draw the center line of something else? Well, if I were to extend this out, you can see that, yes, in fact, that is a double branch that we've got drawn there, okay? We are using the default 45-degree branch with 45-degree elbows to give you this cross section there, okay? We can also say that we're looking at this, and if I change what this is being told over here, where it is looking at a double branch, you can also see that this is also obviously the center lines for a T branch, right? But what we know for a fact is those center lines don't define a Y branch, okay? So most folks ask the question at this point, they understand, okay, the center lines aren't right. So how do I fix this? Well, what we do is we use the ability in DuckQuote to move the endpoint of a section, not the section. And we're going to back these endpoints up to give us room to finish what we really want. Okay, so I'm going to click that endpoint and push this back some. I'm going to click that endpoint and bring it back some. And then finally, I'm going to click that endpoint and move it back some. All right. So remember, we're fixing something. So here's what I would do. I'm going to actually draw my Y branch over here, and this will teach you how to do it right the first time. You're going to come with your trunk to the end, then you're going to draw from that. I'm going to use a 45-degree Y branch. So I'm going to say I'm going to turn this at 45 degrees, and we click there. Don't get excited about the fact that it gave you something different. I'm drawing with a different diameter than the trunk. So DuckQuote is making an assumption. That's okay. We're going to come over here and we're going to click and we're going to do the same thing for the other side. Okay. And now sometimes I have to select, but sometimes clicking on it is all I need to do. As you can see now, DuckQuote recognizes those center lines define a Y branch, okay? So we can see that on this side, we want that Y branch to be a 6-inch. So I'm gonna set this side to be not 4, but 6, okay? This side needs to be 4. So we're gonna set that side to 4, all right? And now I'm going to draw a small bit so that it represents this and this trunks. In other words, I'm going to do this so that I get my elbows in here, okay? So let's go ahead and draw the 6-inch side. We don't need much, just a little. And I'm going to go ahead and remember this side is the 4. So we're going to draw a little bit of 4-inch, okay? And what I wanted to happen has, and that is that I'm being told these are too short to include the elbows. So we're going to go ahead and let DuckQuote fix that so that we get just the Y branch and the elbow. That's all we want. Okay. Now, in this particular case, notice because we need a reducer here, and the reason DuckQuote puts a reducer here is that going from an 8 to a 4 is more than 2 sizes. And simply put, we cannot get the cones correct to fit and weld if we are more than 2 sizes off on these branches. So we get a 6 to a 4 reducer, okay? All right, now I'm going to back this one up just a little bit more because we need it to be out of the way slightly. And here's how I get things set up. I first have to make a decision, which is easy in this case because I'm using a flex hose connection here. So I don't have to have this lined up perfectly here. We can move it a few inches off, but I'm going to take this Y branch and the elbows. I'm going to select it using the selection box tool. All right. And then all I'm going to do is move it down so that it is in line right there. You can see the snap happens. It's in line with this trunk. Okay. And then all I have to do is where I backed that off, I'm going to bring it forward again. And we get back our Y branch. This is now lined up so I can trim that off and I can bring this back, let it connect, and that side is ready to go. Now, what about this side? Well, this is as short as we can have this. So what I'm going to do, again, we're going to bring this over to where it's even with that. Trim that little piece off. I'm going to double click, which selects the whole section there. Then I'm just going to nudge it over and let it connect. And there we have fixed and have the Y branch that we want. Okay. All right. So we showed you how to do it right the first time. We showed you how to correct it, and we showed you how to figure out how it had gone wrong. All right. So that's hopefully covered Y branches. We're going to go ahead and close this. Now, the next has to do with snap lines, and you saw me use snap lines there. Sometimes snap lines are good, and sometimes snap lines get in the way. We're going to turn a few things off here so that we can see things really nicely. And I'm going to point out that what we have got is an auto diverter here. And this is used to control how things happen. Some people would look at this as a summer winter kind of thing, but they wanted this to allow either outside air in or from this unit. This goes way back to fans and stuff in the back. And you can see this was drawn on. And if I show this in a very specific way, point, you can see that this trunk is lined up perfectly with our axes. So drawing that particular little elbow at the bottom to connect to that diverter was very easy. Let me show you what the problem is over here. I'm going to click draw, select there, and I'm just for the purposes of this, I'm going to disable the snap, which you do with the S button. It either enables or disables. And we want that 45-degree elbow, so I'm going to select that here, okay? But the problem is, look where those guidelines go. They're following our standard axes, okay? So I'm going to have to use my protractor and select that it's going to go right along there. Well, if we enable these snaps, watch what might happen here, because we've got a lot of crowded stuff going on. As I try to come down, notice I've got snap lines jumping all over the place. And in fact, it grabs it and shoves it not just down, but over slightly, so it's not really correct, okay? So once again, I'm gonna undo that. I'm gonna show you that if I am going to be drawing, or if I have anything selected in edit mode, I can come down here and using the S, I can disable, or once it's disabled, I can enable snap lines again. That will allow me to do what I needed to do, a 45-degree using that. Okay, and then I can go right to where I need it to be and everything is great. And if you think things are kind of tight there, imagine, because I have done these before, this is actually a pretty spread out situation. But imagine if there were 98 drops within the same area that you see here. And trust me, I've had that situation. You really have to remember to jump in and out and turn on and off those snap lines, because they can in fact pull your work out of kilter. And then it gets to be really difficult to get things to connect. Okay, so we're going to back out of there. And then finally, let's talk about equipment and connections on equipment. We're going to open up this guy right here. So we have equipment here. These are actually three-dimensional models, okay? If I were to use just the equipment button, I could drop in a generic piece, let's say a machine, okay? And let's say we're going to put it there. And then I could actually come in and in edit mode, select it, and I can start adding connections. So let's say that we need 2 4s and a 6 connection. All right. Well, we would come in here. Round is going to be what it is. By the way, we can also do squared around transitions by choosing rectangular here, but we're going to stick with round for right now. We're going to use the machine adapter, and we're going to say that we need a 4-inch. Now we have to actually give it what it is that we're going to be creating as far as the pneumatics here. So this is a wood system. We're going to run it 4,500 feet per minute. And I can use the little calculator over here to figure out how much volume that'll pull. And we can say, okay, and now I can actually select. Well, let's say that we've got one of the 4 inches down here about 6 inches off the floor. And let's say that we've got another connection just like that, almost directly above at say 24 inches. Okay, so there's my 2 4s. And let's say that we need a 6-inch on the top, okay? And it'll be on the top here on the side. So I'm going to add another connection. I'm going to change this to a 6. Remember to recalculate your volume. And the reason you want to do that is using connections on machines is one way that DuckQuote can actually size and give you pressure calculations, okay? Now, we've defined these, but I do want to show you something. Let's get rid of this one piece of trunk, and we're gonna redraw it. And I want you to watch as I pass over this machine. Notice the snap lines. The connections on equipment will act as active drawing points or active endpoints. So they will have snap lines. Now you can imagine if we had put connections on every one of these machines and we're trying to start, how many snap lines are going to reach out and grab things, right? So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and then continue over, because in this case, we're using that snap line to actually show us where it is that we're going to want to come down. But also look at the time it took to create the connections on that one machine. Whereas I could have simply come out here and draw things down to where I wanted them, make my changes, branch there. In other words, I don't have to put the connections on the machines. Now, also, besides the time, you need to know the location of each of these connections, especially if you're going to be doing hard connections, all right? And finally, if you are using hard connections, if you're using connections on machines, when you run calculations, you have to pay attention to whether you're using manual or automatic setting for the open ends. The manual, if you recall, requires each open end to be connected to a machine. And by the way, that includes at the collector as well. Manual will require every end, open end, to be connected to something. Automatic does not have that same requirement, okay? So if we try to run things in manual, we are told there's an open connection, and it's showing us on the machine which one is the problem with the little question mark. If we run in automatic, we're still getting a problem because we put a machine there and we put connections on it. So DuckQuote is assuming you must have wanted to do that. Fastest way to get around this particular problem we're running into is in edit mode. You select the machine that had those and you simply remove those connections. Now in automatic, DuckQuote will do the sizing, everything just fine. All right. Well, that kind of covers what we wanted to talk about: why branches, how not to, how to fix it if you kind of bump into things, how to turn on and off those snap lines and what can happen with them. And they can be insidious. You do have to pay attention to how things look once you're drawing. Pardon. And then finally, talking about equipment and the pros and cons of using connections on it. I will give you now an editorial that I've shown you both ways. When I am drawing systems, especially large systems, I almost never bother to put connections into the machines. In a lot of cases, I don't even bother to put in the equipment if it's a very large system. If it's a system like this where you've got under a dozen machines, putting in the models can really help your clients visualize what it is that they're buying, and it makes them more confident, more comfortable in making that buying decision. So you need to think about the payoff for your effort versus what it's going to be in the end, and that's that. Well, listen, guys, that is everything we wanted to cover today. I won't be talking to you next month because I will be off on a vacation. So hope everybody has a great holiday season, and I will see everybody, so to speak, in the new year. You guys have a great rest of the month.